record on my end and work on sharing here so we can get going and try to keep us on time. So today we're going to talk about our 2021 dry bean research here in Michigan. I titled this Evaluation of Unique End-Use Traits. We talk a lot about yield and disease resistance and these other things when we talk to growers and through our other extension events. But one thing that, in beans we often probably don't talk enough about is our canning quality and those different traits that are unique to not only genetics, but environments that they're produced in. So our 2021 dry bean performance trials were run this year here in Michigan for 40 or 50 plus years through the Bean Commission and now through MSU with the Bean Commission support. So this year we tested 150 entries across 11 different market classes. And you can see the average yields that we had here. We're all doing, average to above average for the state of Michigan average yields. The thing I would comment on this is the uniformity of yields across those locations. Typically in those 6 locations, you may have 3 or 4 that do well, a couple that are more average, and then usually at least one ends up on the poorer side just due to weather events and how sensitive our dry bean crop can be. However, we had very strong performance across all locations. And you will see that the bottom Tuscola and italics at 23.9 bags the acre is a little bit lower. But what that was is our dry land kidney and cranberry bean trial. So that would be relatively expected from that location. And all yield results are found in Bulletin E3465. If you type that into Google, it'll pull up this document and bring you up with all of this year's yield results. Like we say, talking about canning quality, there's a lot more to this than just yield. And that's why we have and continue to move forward with an extensive canning trial. We have a lot of different end uses for beans as we are working with a food crop, unlike some of our other commodities. And it's important that we keep these traits kind of on the top of our radar and thought process as we look at variety development. So to give you guys an idea of where these locations are at within the state of Michigan, we have 6 different locations there indicated by the white stars. And I also outlined kind of our 4-county area there in green, which is really the heart of our bean production region in the state of Michigan. On any given year, up to 80% of our production can take place in just those 4 counties in the Thumb and Saginaw Valley. For the purpose of today's talk, we'll be looking at samples from the Montcalm County location, which would be the farthest west there, which is our irrigated location where we grow kidney and cranberry beans. Our dry land location for kidney and cranberry beans is right here on the border of Tuscola and Saginaw counties. Our first location for small and medium seeded beans, so our blacks, navies, great northerns, pintos, and small reds was Bay County, which was planted early. And our second location was Huron County, which was planted on the later side of June 11th, just for a visual reference of where these locations are in the state. So a little bit of background of how these trials do work. So these are public trials. They can be entered by any breeder or public entity in the United States or North America. We take entries from both public breeding programs, private breeding programs, as well as other interested seed companies and food companies that are interested in both agronomic performance as well as canning quality. So in early March, parties are solicited for entries, and that's where we did gain those 150 entries for this year through that public process. Into April, we work on trial design. This is kind of an overhead shot of what a trial does look like when we put it into our software and design that protocol. Each individual box on here represents one plot. That would be 4 rows wide, so 6.6 feet by 25 feet long. And that's what we actually have for our planted and harvested area. So if you think of that, each one of these boxes will represent a different variety. And within these shaded areas, each variety is replicated 4 times. So these are truly replicated trials on farmers' fields in the state of Michigan that we do eventually draw these canning samples from. Seed is shipped into Michigan and then individually counted into our envelopes for planting. So you can see here some treated navy bean seed that is treated with a fungicide and insecticide, which is standard for our production, individually counted past an electric eye into a seed packet. You can see here on the right, the envelopes, we have Ronnie's Red, Light Red Kidney, Red Dawn, and a few experimentals. And the number on the top left of that packet actually indicates the planting order. So when you put together that map that I had previously shown, it's kind of like a big jigsaw puzzle of how these packets fit together, where you gain that randomization as well as replication across that field. Through the month of June, we do work on planting those trials. We have here up in Huron County this year, that was our last plot we planted. Our student intern this year was Danielle. She was pretty happy and smiley in that picture because that was our last plot we planted, about 7,000 individual plots that we put in last year. So definitely a lot of time on the planner, and it ended up being a pretty good year for us. Through July, our plots are maintained just like commercial production. For weed management would be a big portion of it. Just keeping our weed control in check to keep a limit on those potential confounding factors. We then do take different evaluations on disease resistance or tolerance. Here on the far left, we have a very common disease, white mold. That's one of our number one yield limiting factors in Michigan, as identified by growers. We have anthracnose in the middle, which can cause some staining on the actual seed. And then we have a root rot picture on the right. That'll cause premature plant death. So all very, very important traits and characteristics for our growers to understand. And into September, we do start our dry bean harvest. You can see here we have plot harvest right next to our commercial growers, as we're often harvesting at the very same time as they're looking to have their wheat crop planted immediately following their bean field, as well as our research plot. And then, through October and November, it becomes a very busy season for us as we clean and weigh all these samples to be able to get those yield results that we showed out to our growers. But however, as we're going to talk today, that's not where the road ends. That's also where we start our process of looking at these canning samples. Here's a quick shot of the prep work that's involved there. Here we're taking moistures on our clean samples and then generating precise fill weights for our cans ahead of our actual processing date at the Food Processing Innovation Center. So here's an example of what that looks like. We have a Viper Small Red here with a can volume filled to 115 grams of solid per can. So we get that moisture, and then we have that moisture adjusted fill weight here at 131.8 grams to reach our 115 grams of solids. They're then individually bagged, so that way we can go through with a soaking and blanching step and keeping all these samples different and identifiable ahead of canning. So to talk about what that process actually looks like on a per class basis. Here's an example. We have our navy beans. They go on a 30-minute soak at 125 degrees, and they're blanched for 5 minutes at 200 degrees. Our blacks would be our shortest protocol with just a 90-second blanch at 200 degrees. And we are still utilizing an overnight soak for pinnos, dark and light red kidneys, as well as our cranberry beans, followed by that 5-minute blanch. All soaks do have the addition of calcium as well. So once we prepare all these individual samples and head over to FPIC, we are able to use these steam kettles here that they have at that facility for our soak and blanch steps, which really helps out in the efficiency of this production. In combination, we work with MSU breeding program as well as the USDA program to put 1,700 to 2,000 cans through that facility in just a short couple days. So they're definitely busy days, but it really helps us to match up to a more commercial type program, at least as close as we can on the scale that we're working with hand-packed cans. And their help is definitely appreciated. As you can see, the assembly line that we're able to put together here, where they're taking soak weights to look at hydration coefficients, and eventually move down the line to where we have some cans laid out to start filling with beans as well as brine. So to talk about some more of those details, we are utilizing a 307 by 407 can. They are filled with brine that's just below boiling that consists of 1.5% sucrose, 1.2% sodium chloride or salt, and 0.005 calcium chloride. Our thermal cycle is a cook at 19 minutes at 250 degrees, and they do use one rotation during cool down. We have these nice cryo tags that we're able to label those cans that don't fade or get removed through that intensive cooking cycle. So that's how we keep our cans identifiable through that process prior to opening. And then into January, we do start evaluations. We opened just under 400 cans this year for this evaluation that we're going to talk about today. All these evaluations were done blind this year, as we did have the variety information was not available on those samples when our evaluations went through. That is something that is new for us. And we did because we really felt it bettered the science to have that evaluation done that way and to prevent any potential inherent bias. So this data was just released yesterday. So if you go to michiganbean.com/research, you'll see our 2021 Michigan Dry Bean Research Report that includes tables with our compiled canning scores for individual varieties by locations. However, what you'll get the chance to look at today are the images that we've taken in the USDA photo box that allows us to take a really high quality uniform picture of all these samples to be able to really gain a sense of what that score means on a visual basis. So to talk about what those numbers actually mean, so everything is scored on a 1 to 5 scale. Got a little ahead of myself there. On a 1 to 5 scale. For black beans, we do use 2 scores, one for appearance and one for color. For all other classes, we just use 1 appearance score. So our appearance here is 1 to 5, with 1 being unacceptable and 5 being an excellent appearance with over 90% intact. And then our separate score for color in black beans is also a 1 to 5, with 1 being very light brown on potential seed mixing, and then a 5 being a very dark 100% uniform color. So now for the rest of the talk, we'll move into actual results and images of the pictures that we'll talk about, starting with navy beans. So our navy bean trial this year had 29 entries. 14 of those were commercial and 15 were experimental. Average yields were very close to those overall plot averages we shared in the beginning. And we'll take a quick snapshot at yield. I like to do this, if we're watching this talk, to take a couple quick notes here on which ones I want to keep an eye out for. So for these charts, we have yield as presented as percent of the check. So what that means is we have Merlin as our check, or our standard across these trials, and everything to the right is numerically outperforming Merlin in a percentage basis. So here we have Valiant, which is providing about 6% more yield than Merlin as a check. And I like to do that because I think a lot of times our growers can really understand what that means. Most navy bean growers in the state of Michigan have experience with Merlin. So if they know their 5-year average of Merlin is 20 bags to the acre, when they look at a variety that is better than that, they can kind of gauge it in their head and their own numbers of what they should expect to see. So some real top performers that we've seen out of the trials, not only this year, but over the past 3 years, as this data is combined over 3 locations, over 3 years and 4 locations, have been Liberty and Victory. So these are 2 new varieties that just picked up this name this past year. They were under the numbers 15095 and 15094. So those will be 2 that will be good to keep an eye on as we look at these canning scores. We've also seen very good performance still out of HMS Medalist, which has been a variety that's been around for quite a while now, as well as Blizzard. Both of these we do have quite a bit of experience with. A little bit newer one would be HMS Bounty, still showing very strong performance, as well as Armada. So an important note to make too is when we look at these names, sometimes you'll see varieties numbered, and sometimes you'll see them with a name. And a good way to, or kind of good rule of thumb to differentiate those would be that if you see a number or a mixture of letter and numbers, more oftentimes than not, that is an experimental line. So that is something that is not commercial yet. It's still in those stages of deciding if it's a variety that's going to be move forward or not. But if you see a name, that that's a commercial variety. that either is available for our growers to purchase from their local elevator or will be in hopefully the near future. So for the rest of the talk, we'll get into looking at our navy beans. Our first sample here is 12039, an experimental line with an average appearance of 3.6 out of 5 across those two locations. So for all of these samples, you'll see the Huron County location on the left and our Bay County location on the right. So overall, very similar performance. Anecdotally, I'd say we potentially had a little bit better quality out of our Huron County location when we look across a lot of these samples, but it is important just to keep an eye on potential environmental differences there. So 12039 with our first score of 3.6. Our second sample, another experimental, 14068 with an appearance of 4.2. So overall, a very good canner. And I will mention again too that this will be posted later on. So if you want to go back to review this on YouTube later, take potential screenshots, everybody is more than welcome, as this will be publicly available for everybody to review once again. On to 14078, another experimental with an average appearance of 3.3. One 14084, another experimental navy with an average appearance of 3.9. Apex, a commercial variety with an average appearance of 4.1. Argosy, commercial navy bean with an average appearance of 3.8. Armada, commercial navy bean with an average appearance of 3.9. Blizzard, commercial navy bean with an average appearance of 4.1, a very strong canner. EX1802-N, an experimental line with an average appearance of 4.3. EX1803-N, average appearance of 3.9. EX1804-N, average appearance of 3.6. HMS Bounty, average appearance of 4.0. So this is a relatively newer commercial line for us here in Michigan that's really picked up some traction with our growers over the past couple of years. So it is good to see that we do have this, above average type canning quality with HMS Bounty as well. Rogue, commercial navy bean with average appearance of 4.6. So very good. Nautica, average appearance of 4.4. N20404, an experimental navy bean with an average appearance of 3.8. N20388, experimental, average appearance of 4.1. N19285, with an average appearance of 4.3. N19253, average appearance of 3.0. N19246, an average appearance of 3.6. N19226, with an average appearance of 3.0. N18103, with an average appearance of 4.2. Then we have Merlin Navy Bean, a standard for the class that we use in the yield data, with an average appearance of 3.4. And we have Liberty Navy Bean, the one that was towards the right end of our scale when looking at yield data, with overall very good appearance scores of 4.0. HMS Medalist, average appearance of 4.2. Victory Navy Bean, average appearance of 3.9. Also a very strong performer for yield, a newer one for us here in Michigan. Valiant Navy Bean, average appearance of 4.3. SV1893GH, an experimental Navy Bean with an average appearance of 4.1. Shock commercial Navy Bean with an average appearance of 3.3. Vigilant Navy Bean, our last one here, with an average appearance of 4.0. All right, from the group, are there any quick questions on Navy beans or something you'd like us to go back to take another look at before we move on to black beans? All right, not seeing any hands, we'll move on to black beans. So our black bean trial was a little bit smaller than our navy bean trial with 26 total entries. Of these, we had 11 were commercial and 15 experimental. Average yields range from 27 to 35 bags to acre, with our Tuscola County being our strongest performer there at 35.8. Looking at that same type of yield chart that we looked at navy beans, here we utilize Zorro as our standard. Anything to the left we have is numerically underperforming Zorro, and anything to the right we have numerically overperforming Zorro. You will see the statistical group of B does carry though from black tails all the way down to Spectre. However, we do have one that breaks away from the rest of the pack with Nimbus, a newer black bean for us. That looks to have about a 15% type yield advantage over Zorro, which in our yield trials equates to about a 3 to 4 bag type advantage So definitely not an insignificant yield gain there to Nimbus over those same 4 locations in 3 years of testing. So we'll start these. We will have both a color and appearance score on all of these black bean samples. The appearance is a little tougher to gauge in picture, as you see that black color tends to blur some lines compared to navy beans, but overall color is relatively easily picked up as we move from samples of poor color to better color. So our first one we have here is 14531 with a color score of 2.6 out of 5 and an appearance score of 3.1 out of 5. We have 15610 with a color score of 3.6 and an appearance score of 3.9. One 5619 experimental black with a color score of 4.3 and an appearance of 3.9. So definitely much stronger color than we've seen in the last sample on this. 16590 with a color score of 3.3 and an appearance of 2.9. 16648 experimental black with a color score of 2.8 and an appearance score of 3.2. 17715 with a color score of 3.9 and an appearance score of 3.8. 17751 with an average color score of 2.3 and average appearance of 3.2. 'Ace Black Bean with an average color score of 2.6 and average appearance of 3.1 across both locations. We have Adams Black Bean with a color score of 2.9 and average appearance score of 3.3. Then we have experimental B19309 with a color score of 3.6 and appearance score of also 3.6. Experimental B19330 with an average color score of 4.1 and appearance of 3.8. B19344 with an average color score of 4.9 and appearance of 3.5. So this was our strongest color score out of the group, was from this experimental 19344.
Hey, Scott, just a quick question. When we see a number like that, are we 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years away from actually seeing it commercially in growers' fields?
Yes, that is correct, Joe. And especially with these B numbers, these are from the MSU breeding program. So B19344. The 19 indicates the year that line was crossed. So that was crossed in 2019. And in their program, you're typically looking at 6 to 7 years before something would be commercialized, not given any problems in production. So this line would still, if it was moved forward to be commercialized, a few years out from that potential. And we have experimental B20547 with an average color score of 3.9 and average appearance of 3.7. Experimental B20591 with an average color of 3.6 and average appearance of 3.7. B20597 with an average color score of 3.9 and average appearance of 3.7. B3036381 with an average color score of 4.3 and average appearance of 3.7. Pretty strong color. BL1726-2 with a color score of 4.4 and appearance score of 4.0. So strong canner for both color and appearance here. We have Black Bear with a color score of 1.9 and appearance score of 2.5. Black Tails, color score of 3.1, appearance score 3.5. Black Beard, very strong color score at 4.4 and good appearance score at 3.7. Eclipse, color score 2.9, appearance score 3.4. ND Twilight, color score 2.9, appearance score 3.1. Nimbus, commercial black bean with a color score of 2.5 and appearance score of 2.7. Spectre, color score 2.8, appearance score 2.2. Zenith, color score 4.8, appearance score 3.5. Very good performance out of Zenith, and this has been used in our trials as sort of a canning check for a while too, for the goal of our color, as well as very good appearance. Zorro, color 3.5, appearance 4.0. And that concludes our black beans. Are there any questions on black beans before we move on to small red and pink beans? Anything you want to go back and take a second look at? All
Hey
right.
Scott, I don't know if you know this, but out of Michigan State, are they doing genetics? I mean, for the canning color? I mean, is that down the black bean end of it that they're trying to promote too, as well as yield?
Yeah,
'Cause I
so
see I
black,
see a lot of these, some of these bean numbers got some pretty good color scores.
yeah, that's a great observation, Dan. And yes, to my knowledge, the breeding program under Dr. Kelly, previously now under Dr. Gomez, has used canning color as a selection criteria when looking at black beans. Yes, yield is always king, so to speak, but they've always tried to keep an eye on color and appearance as well to make sure that we're bringing along yield, disease resistance, as well as acceptable and hopefully superior quality traits. And I would say that it's probably a rule that goes for most breeders across North America too. Um, and sort of the reason that we continue this work here in Michigan to make sure that that data is available to make those selections. So then looking at small red and pink beans, we had 12 entries here, so quite a bit smaller trial, with 4 of them being commercial and 8 experimental. Overall, very strong yields once again in that 27 to almost 33 bag range. So for our 3-year average, we've only had 3 of these lines, in those 4 locations over 3 years, with Viper being our check, and both Cayenne and Ruby statistically underperforming Viper, the check that we've had for a good number of years, holding what appears to be a 2 to 4 type bag advantage over the remaining entries. But we will look at all lines entered in our photos here. So we'll start that with an experimental line 16686, small red, with an average appearance score of 3.4. Then we have a pink bean, an experimental S18904, with an average appearance score of 2.3. And I believe this line has been moved forward for potential commercialization under the name of Coral. So S18904. Experimental small red 17837 with an average appearance score of 2.6. Experimental small red R17604 with an average appearance score of 4.3. Cayenne commercial small red with an average appearance score of 3.8. Experimental 17875 with an average appearance score of 3.2. Experimental 17839 with an average appearance score of 3.8. R20627, an average appearance score of 3.8. Ruby, commercial small red with average appearance of 3.2. R20667, average appearance score of 3.9. Viper, commercial small red, the standard for our yield with an average appearance of 2.8. And then our last pink, Rosetta, commercial pink bean with the average appearance of 2.7. Are there any questions on small reds or pinks before we move on to our last class? We'll talk today about Great Northerns and Pinos. Anything we want to take a second look at? All right, so we'll move on to Great Northerns and Pinos. I combined these two classes for the purpose of today. So in total, we had 17 entries. 11 of those were commercial, 6 were experimental. Average yields 26 to 30 bags to the acre. So our yield chart here is a little bit different. We have not had any of these lines, consecutively for 3 years, or very many of them. So we're just going to look at 2021 yield data here for both Great Northern and Pinos. If we look here at Aries, everything to the right would be our Great Northerns. So Aries is a variety we've grown a little bit of here in Michigan. We're seeing some strong performance out of both Eiger as well as Pegasus in that market class for commercial lines. So that's optimistic to see. Both Great Northerns and Pinos, we don't grow a whole lot of acres here in Michigan, so that's why they are a little bit of a smaller class in our testing, but definitely something important for us to keep an eye on and look for potential in. And everything to the left here would be our Pinos, or we have La Paz, one of our standards, somewhat equivalent with Charo, one of our newer commercial lines. We're also seeing some good performance out of Palomino, and some of our slow darks that we're looking at in the experimental category. So starting with Great Northerns, we'll take a look at Draco, commercial Great Northern bean with average appearance of 2.9. Then Aries, Great Northern, average appearance of 2.8. Experimental 14164, average appearance of 4.2. So very good canner. Powderhorn, Great Northern, average appearance of 3.8. ND Pegasus, average appearance of 3.1. So ND Pegasus had looked very strong in yield trials this year, and it was somewhat exciting for Great Northern's potential here in Michigan. So it's good to see that it's at least matching our current standards for canning quality this year. Experimental G19613, average appearance of 2.8. Experimental G19611, average appearance of 2.4. Eiger, commercial Great Northern, average appearance 3.4. Virgo, commercial Great Northern, average appearance of 3.3. Moving over to Pinos, we have SV 6139GR, the average appearance of 2.4. Experimental P19713, average appearance of 3.2. ND Falcon, average appearance of 3.1. La Paz, one of our standards for Pinos, average appearance of 3.2. Charo, average appearance of 2.9. So here we have a slow dark Pinot, P19103, the average appearance of 3.6. Here we have another slow dark, this one commercial with ND Palomino, average appearance of 3.8. And that concludes the samples we have today. I'll go ahead and stop our recording here and our share and open it up. If there's any questions that you folks may have,